Tahani Mustafa, who is in Amman, in the Jordanian capital. She's a Palestine analyst at the International Crisis Group. Tahani, welcome to the program. The violence seems to have escalated even since Naftali Bennett, which is what, I'm guessing about a year ago, said to Israeli security forces, do whatever you have to do. You have carte blanche, keep Israeli citizens safe. And there was a sudden spike in Israeli violence, and it seems to be getting worse.
Thank you. Yes, it is. We've seen Israeli policy being purely punitive. It's a tougher, harsh application of the stick. The Israelis have been ramping up everything from settlement activity, encouraging settler violence, targeted assassinations. I mean, the list goes on. And ultimately, Palestinians feel like there's no horizon. Things aren't getting better. They continue to get worse. Israeli brutality and collective punishment hasn't been enough to deter them as of late. The Israeli tough line has backed Palestinians in a corner. And when you push Palestinians with their backs to the wall, giving them no hope, they have nothing left to lose by striking back however they can.
An ambulance driver in Jenin has spoken to the media saying this is a war. Is it a war?
No, a war is a very convoluted term. It implies that you have two equal sides here. This is absolutely not a war. This is a violent Israeli military occupation. These are Palestinians who have the right to defend themselves, living under a violent Israeli military occupation. These groups like the Jenin brigades, their posture is very defensive. What they're doing is a very, very defensive tactic. The Israelis are coming in and they are pushing back. That's precisely what we're seeing. Palestinians striking back however they can.
How long until Palestinians go further in their resistance to these attacks? The word intifada has been mentioned a lot. People are wondering if we're close to that point of a mass armed uprising. In the face of airstrikes, what do Palestinians do?
First of all, we have to consider the fact that the Israelis are using airstrikes as a sign of Israeli weakness, not strength. Last month, towards the end of the month, we saw Israeli ground troops in deep trouble in Jenin when one of their tanks was struck by a very, very primitive means. So ultimately, when Israel feels like its ground forces are in trouble, that's when it tends to resort to its air force. So I would definitely not take this as a sign of Israeli strength by any means. But ultimately, can we call this an intifada? No. Look, people draw parallels to the intifada all the time. Whenever things kick off in the West Bank, in Gaza, people always, claim it's the sign of a new intifada. This is not a new intifada. Palestinians don't have the means to launch another intifada. They don't have the kind of unity they did 2 decades ago. They don't even have the physical space to mobilize the way that they did 2 decades ago. What you're seeing is Palestinians on the defensive. They are being pushed to the brink. And right now, they have ultimately no means to defend themselves. Israeli search and arrest operations have seen an incredible uptick with this government. And those search and arrest operations, we know, always come with Palestinian fatalities. So what are these communities left to do? They're completely defenseless. They have no PA security force to defend them. The Israeli occupation is not doing what it should be doing under international law, which is guaranteeing the right to life. So ultimately, Palestinians are left with no choice but to push back.
Tahani, I want to take you back to last week, if you don't mind. There are two sorts of violence that Palestinians face: Israeli state violence and then violence from illegal settlers. When the three most senior security officials in the Israeli state say that settler violence is nationalist terrorism, those two bits of violence, they're two sides of the same coin. It's violence against Palestinians. But how surprising was it for you to hear those three security officials say settler violence is nationalist terrorism?
It's not a surprise, ultimately, because we've seen the kind of schisms between the security establishment and the political establishment. The security establishment are the ones on the ground. They are the ones that have to deal with any blowback coming from any decisions being taken from the top. But ultimately, those words are meaningless when they come with really no action on the ground. You can call it what you want, nationalist terrorism or whatever. But ultimately, if you're not doing anything to actually prevent such settler violence on the ground, and the way that these settlers now feel so emboldened to be attacking something like 22 villages in the space of a week, then again, rhetoric is ultimately meaningless. What do these terms and labels mean if you're not really doing anything to prevent those things from escalating on the ground?
Tahani Mustafa, thank you very much indeed for your time. I appreciate it.